So that's some examples and some background on the strategies. We want to talk about some specific aspects of how you might flip your class, and this is just really kind of general, and again we'll show you some of the technologies for how to work this. But part of the thing that you're going to need to think about is, in addition to the act of learning, is how you design the materials that you're using outside of class. Kind of drawing from what Jenny showed at the stat class, the first thing you're going to need to be able to do is create videos. And there's some different strategies for creating those videos. One thing that we really advocate, based upon a lot of research about people's attention spans and how students watch things like video, is that you really don't want these videos to be longer than about something like 10 or 15 minutes. Is sort of at the point at which the brain kind of turns off when you're watching a video. So in the case of Jenny Shook's course, that was a 15 minutes of total video that we needed to watch, but that was trunked out by lessons.
Why can't the outside of class portion not be video-based but be text-based and still do the same kind of thing in class?
Yeah, I think that it's the sort of engaging aspect, right? That sort of multimodal sort of, and it completely can be. There's no reason. I think the video, part of what we're trying to do is take that lecture experience and bring it outside of class, right? So they can read text and they probably still need to read chapters of the book, but the video sort of simulates what's going on in the lecture. That's sort of the instructor, you as the expert, speaking to the students, talking in a sort of casual manner about the content, having the video aspect of it, so there's a little bit more personality maybe than some text.
Although you can do that within the class with mini lectures,
yes.
Not doing completely assignments or in discussion, but do miniature type. And this is what I've done before, and for a long time it worked. It really did. But you do have to have a certain level of student buy-in and doing the work outside of class, whether it's reading or it's watching a video. Either one, they're going to have to do it.
But that's a general problem with teaching at all, and whatever strategy.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Again, this stuff is.
However, if you lecture in class, at least you know they've heard it. Whether they've assimilated it, that's another question.
That's a problem. If you're lecturing at them for an hour and they're sitting there nodding their heads, you don't know that they learned anything. If they're doing an activity and they're engaging and they're sharing with each other and they're responding to you, it exposes their thinking and you do know. So it's a little bit safer to assume that you're understanding that they're learning by doing the flip method, more traditional methods. But flipping and traditional pedagogies are not mutually exclusive. So again, so the videos, doing it as a video makes it a little bit more engaging than reading text. Again, not mutually exclusive, but it's an option for you. I like to do the videos and intersperse that with some formative assessments and knowledge checks. So 10 minutes of covering a concept, a couple low stakes or no stakes questions to see if they're keeping up, to engage with their retention of the materials, and then go on for another 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes of video, and then another knowledge check. So there's ways to have assessment engagement really tied into that outside of class experience. And if you do decide to go this particular route, again, there's lots of different strategies, but if you do go the route of trying to do the videos outside of class, Media Commons is here at this campus, it's at every campus, so if you need help producing those videos, we're there to assist you. And in a few minutes, I'll show you a couple of technologies for creating video that makes it extremely, extremely simple. So you shouldn't need that much help if you use the right technology. Yeah.
It sounds like you're suggesting, in a way, that the video is replacing text because you're saying it's more engaging. But I don't think you really mean that. And how do we, you know what I mean? Because I think more and more, and it's kind of surprising that in the last couple of semesters, students have asked me, do I need to buy the book? And they're midway in the semester when they had to refer to the Z table at the back of the book, they said, oh wow, I didn't know I needed a book. So I don't think that's what you're suggesting. No,
I don't. And again, so this one tricky thing about flipping is that you do have to consider that, I don't know if it's university policy or recommendations that the university makes, that per credit hour students need to spend so many hours of work outside of class. So you can't flip and then expect them to do homework and watch these videos and read this book if that kind of total outside class stuff adds up to more than what they're expecting to be doing. So I think a strategy that's good in terms of the video is keep the video short. Don't try to fit your entire lecture inside of the video, because then you're going to start exceeding that time. They have to watch 50 minutes. They have to do 2 hours of reading, and they have to do 2 hours of homework. They're not going to your point, they're not going to do that. So that's the preparation for class. You're not going to get that happening. I think that a better strategy is to do something like in the order of 15 minutes of introduction to the concept, read a chapter, and then you don't do the homework. You do some assessments, some small assessments that are really quick to do, and then really what you're doing is prepping them for the discussion in class. So I think that fits within that outside of class. And it's definitely not watch the video instead of reading. It's a little bit of both. But those things should all, in a good design, tie into each other. The video should reference the text of the show.
Yeah, Mark Seagay, who's one of the guys that Matt mentioned, he's doing kind of a third of his class this way, and he's relying heavy on the textbook like he always has. So he's still asking the students to read, a chapter outside of class, but his kind of recorded video lecture is basically 10 minutes of him kind of trying to take that textbook chapter and apply it to an example, apply it to something. So it's still heavy on the reading, just a little video. And then in class, he does a lot of the things with clickers. So he'll bring them in and have them do some active learning kind of things, and he'll pepper in about 3 different clicker questions. And back to your point as well about getting students prepared, he grades them. So these questions that he uses the clickers for, they're part of their points. They can get points if they get these things right. And he's finding with the combination of the text with the video outside of class, with the low stakes clicker questions in class, his students are coming prepared and ready to engage in the active learning stuff and answer these questions he peppers into the face-to-face session. Yeah.
Is there a best practices for specific video content instead of just having a talking head there for 10 minutes? Like a mixture of a face, a slide, a graph, a formula. What's the best approach?
So we'll talk about lecture capture a little bit, and specifically with Panopto, but most of those technologies, or even something like Camtasia, allows you to do webcam capture plus screen plus other things. If you went into a specific application, if you're in a science class or a stat class, you can do a Minitab, so it captures all of that stuff. So I think that in my experience with the lecture capture pilot that I'm in charge of right now, the talking head is not really that important in terms of the content, but it is nice to add a little personality. So students like to see it, but it can be like a little thing over in the corner and the main thing. So you can do it with Panopto, you can do a picture. So that is a nice presentation. That's really easy to set that up.
Yeah, we find with online learning, the head is important. Your students are never going to see you and it's an online class, then that is kind of important. But if they see you in class, in person, that's not that important for the recorded pieces, is one of the things that we found. And we've also found, and this is kind of hard to quantify, it's hard to deliver these things sometimes. If you're just sitting in front of your computer at home some night trying to do a 10-minute lecture, it's hard to deliver that, with there's no body language, there's no audience, there's nothing to really go by. So we have had some students say, the professor sounds really robotic on these videos.
Probably reading the script.
Yeah, and we're trying to figure out ways to address that. And one thing that a University Park faculty member did was actually take a seminar in the theater department. And that helped him, that helped him with his delivery and how to, get in the frame of mind to say almost like anything. It's a little odd.
You said it in the online classes, the presence is important as measured how?
This is just in some of the research studies we looked at when we were looking at not so much flipping the classroom, but lecture capture. Some of the studies that look at lecture capture, they look at, how important is the PowerPoint slide or the visual, how important is it the whiteboard video stream, if there's a whiteboard, how important is the audio, how important is the head of the professor. And they find that just, the online people respond better to having that available. And some of these studies can actually track when a student's watching these, what are they closing? Because some of these lecture capture systems, you can actually go and click off the talking head. You're still going to get the audio, you're just not going to see the person there. And they're finding in online classes, people like that. People don't shut that down. But for face-to-face classes, more people are going in and clicking that that talking head off.
You're asking how they measure presence in these studies like this?
Yeah.
I think it's that sort of sense that they know who the instructor is, that they know that they're able to interact with the instructor. That it's not. I think an example of no presence is a syllabus that they read. They read the text. They take an exam. They read more text and take an exam. That's no presence. Presence. A high-level presence would be lots of synchronous interaction with the instructor and knowing what the instructor looks like and sounds like and relate to them. So it's generally.
Any other questions? No?
Well, I have one comment. I've taught a hybrid class and made videos of myself talking, and I teach speech communication, and you would think it would come naturally, but it's actually tricky. And what you're mentioning about lecturing and making it look natural is really key. And I think if there's a way for you to help us do that, it would really add a lot to these courses. The other little glitch is Angel doesn't seem to be a great platform to hang those videos.
Right.
I use YouTube, but I wish there were a better way.
First we heard. Never heard that one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Lecture Capture does. Something like Panopto. It provides a way to create and post, and then do the access controls for when your students see it. So.
And one of the things we think might happen with these lecture capture pilots is some faculty aren't doing this flipped method. They're still lecturing, but they're recording those lectures, just a straight 50-minute lecture, for instance. Now, next semester, if they're interested in this flipping, they can go back to that 50-minute lecture, chop it up a little bit into 8-minute, 10-minute chunks, and it's more natural delivery then, because you actually had body language and people in the room that were giving you the feedback and things like that. So some people are talking about maybe going that route, just recording their lecture straight up one semester, and then the next semester looking at the split model using those pieces.
With the caveat that recording your lecture in class is not, putting it online is not an online class. Like that's not what makes an online class. There's more to it than that.
Yeah.
But at least that gets that started. They can pick and choose parts of the lecture and say, watch this 10-minute segment.
I'd like to follow up your comment about a script. Accessibility. If I am doing this and putting this all online, am I going to be expected to have an audio transcription for accessibility?
So in one, if not both of the lecture capture solutions that we're piloting right now provide automated transcriptioning. It's not automatic in the sense that it still goes off to a manual transcriptionist, but the process of capturing the video and sending it off to the transcriptionist and then reattaching that to the video is sort of automatic. It still costs us money, but when we get a request to provide transcripts for a class where there's some sort of ADA requirement, then we can do that sort of in a press of a button. So yeah, lecture capture systems are very conscious about accessibility. A big push for this concept of content outside of the LMS, so it can still be sort of hosted inside of. It can be viewed through the LMS, but the actual content is hosted somewhere else. So if you're familiar with Helms, the ICMS, e-learning system, content system, there's ways of getting that content outside. I would never design an entire class and put all the content inside of
What was it, the Julie's hybrid course had the problem with? Is Julie here? No.
What was it? Actually, what I've been doing working with faculty is we've actually been saving the source files, and then currently we're using the streaming server, and then embedding that into the Angel course, and that seems to work really well. It's not an easy, it's not a one-step solution for the faculty, but at least we have the content, and it's not packaged in another program that we might have problems with later on.
Now, if you're doing something like I was suggesting, where you intersperse the video with formative assessment, and you might have something where you're having to host a little bit more complex of a structure inside of an LMS, but I think that the new LMS, whatever we go with, is going to be a lot more stable of an environment to design classes than Angel ever was, at least from what I've seen of them.
And most of the things we're talking about today are stored outside of Angel. A student sees it as if it's in Angel. From a student standpoint, it looks like it's all in their environment. But in terms of the sources, I mean, it's
an access point to the content.
Right. It's the actual content is not
concept
living in that system.
Have you run into any issues with students who, I know on the branch campuses, who don't have access? I mean, here is their access to internet.
Only here.
Here, that don't have computers.
Yeah, I think you're going to have some problems here with students needing to be on campus in order to do it.
I have a number of students who can't do anything off campus because they don't have computers.
They don't have systems at home.
Yeah, so with the stat class, with Jenny Shook's stat class, she is aware of that too. And she actually, so her class is actually Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Friday is an optional class where you can view the lecture videos. So students who, for whatever reason, can't view that video or don't have time in their schedule to view the video outside of class can actually spend that Friday class and come in and watch it. So she's accounted for that. I'm not sure if I like that model totally, but
You're losing a lot of class time doing that.
well, I mean, she has other activities that students can be doing during that time. I agree with you. It's not a great model for everybody, but what it does allow her to do is, with students come in and they say that I didn't have time to watch the video, they have no excuse. So yes, you did. You could come in on Friday and watch.
Yeah, and something I should have mentioned about Jenny's approach. She also makes herself incredibly accessible to her students, to the point of a lot of office hours. She gives them the students her cell number to call her at any time. Her discussion boards are amongst the best that I've kind of ever seen in Angel, where these are really active, super active conversations, and she's just makes sure that she's very responsive. Now, part of that is because that's her personality. The other part is that she's sensitive to this flip design. She really wants to make it work, so she thinks that's a key component. So that's something that's important to think about because students are doing their own things. Think about mechanisms for that. What about this? Like, how can I get some interaction based off of something I'm consuming right now in the content, whatever form it is, textbook, beautifully produced video, whatever it is. How can I get some immediate gratification or conversation started?
Right.
And think about those mechanisms that are available to you, or ones that are emerging.
I just wanted to go over a couple kind of active learning strategies, and some of you may have heard these, some of you are probably doing some of these already. But at the Schreyer Institute, we do a lot of workshops, events, and things along these lines around active learning, and it was kind of, as you mentioned earlier, you were doing this flipped idea in the 90s, right? And that's kind of where we come at with the active learning. Whether it's a textbook, whether it's a video, whatever it is outside of class, we really much encourage these kind of active learning things to go on in class. So some of the things that we get a lot of mileage out of these activities called Think, Pair, Share. Has anybody heard of this before? Handful of people. So the idea here is, you have students either reading something, watching something outside of class, something around their homework, and then when you bring them into class, you pose a question that's based on that homework of some sort. It can be extending the textbook, extending the video. You let them think about it, and then you ask them to turn to their neighbor, figure out what each of them think the answer is, and then kind of share that back with the class. And we find a lot of people doing that now with these guys, right? So that sharing then happens back via clickers. And the faculty members then can bring this up very quickly, take a look, see if people, got the answer right, if there was a right answer, or if it's not a right answer, just see which direction students are leaning towards. Some folks that we see do this already, hotel restaurant management, one of my colleagues there has a whole section on customer service, right? So they'll actually have them read case studies and look at customer service angles and then say, okay, between these two companies, or these two organizations, who's doing this better? Turn to your neighbor, discuss who you think is doing this better, and then share it back to the class. And then usually that's followed up by some sort of discussion as well. So that's a quick way you can get students interacting with one another, as well as coming back to clickers and time that all together as well. A lot of times we also do small group activities. I teach an IST. We do a lot of problem-based learning things, case study type things, especially at the 400 level. So a lot of times our small group activities, we may have folks go out and read real-world requests for proposals. One of the ones I used a couple years ago was a pharmaceutical company who was looking for some sort of training software. So they had this huge RFP that people had to read through and figure out, okay, what software is going to work best for this company? And we would put the students into small groups, let them talk for 20 minutes or so, try and hash out, based on the RFP process, what software is going to fit the needs of this company. And then again, each group shares back out. And it depends on your class size, right? I had 40 kids, we can do this with 40 kids. If you're teaching 250 kids, this becomes a little trickier. And again, I think that's where these can really come in helpful, is that you can just pick a couple of groups, but get the masses, input with one of these devices, which kind of helps. Simulations are one of my favorites. How many people have used simulations in their classes before? Anyone? These can be both, computer-based simulations or kind of role-play simulations. Yeah.
My student is telling me what I've done.
Jogging your memory?
He's jogging my memory.
Yeah.
I have a textbook, which is an online textbook with simulations where they can change the different factors, like what happens if you change the variable on the x-axis versus y, and how does that change the population makeup of the test results. Thank you.
Do you get the feeling it works for your students?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we find the simulations are really powerful, and we see simulations in two different ways. Mark Seagate, who's part of one of these flip pilots, he teaches health policy administration. So he has about 250 kids in this class, and he uses a simulation that they typically work with outside of class. It's a computer simulation called Healthbound. And in this simulation, it's all about the healthcare system, and there's 3 different variables. I'm not an HPA expert, so I had to write them down. There's cost, quality, and accessibility. These are the 3 kind of variables in the system that the students need to kind of either balance or figure out how do you address in your healthcare system these 3 variables. So what Mark does is he'll put students in teams of 3 and tell each student to do something different. So he'll say one student go in and maximize or minimize cost. He'll tell the next student go in and give me the best quality. And then the third student go in and figure out how to make the system the most accessible. And then he'll put them in small groups to figure out, what are the variables? What happened to the other 2 variables when you maxed out this one variable? So he'll have the students in groups kind of trying to figure out how do these variables intertwine with one another when they come back into class after playing the simulation. And then we have some folks in IST, specifically in security risk analysis, doing kind of counterterrorism courses. And they'll actually have students in class and say, okay, this half of the classroom, you're going to role-play the terrorists today. This half, you're going to role-play the counter-terrorists. And he'll actually set up a complete simulation right there in class and say, okay, there might be the government has found something in Pittsburgh. They think Pittsburgh might be some sort of target. And he'll go to the terrorist group and say, okay, this is your target. How would you go about planning something and kind of going about attacking Pittsburgh in some way? And then you go over to the other group and say, how would you go about defending the different targets in Pittsburgh? What would the targets be? How would you go about defending them? And then it becomes a game. Each team gets a move, and it kind of goes back and forth. And the students get really, really engaged and excited about this, and they start to continue to build these things out throughout the semester. So by the time they get to the end of the semester, they have all sorts of fake graphics of analytics and kind of readouts and kind of emergency support center things that they're using on the computer to try and help drive these simulations. So a lot of different ways you can kind of use these